Well, hello, everybody. Good evening. A very happy Tuesday to you. Today is another day for some story time, and we are going to continue to read Split Infinity, Book 1 of the Apprentice Adept series, written by Piers Anthony. So we started it last week. We got through the first 3 chapters. Not sure how many chapters we'll get through tonight because first 3 chapters, 14% of the book. I was looking, the next chapter takes us up to 22%. So 3 chapters, 14%. The next chapter is 8% of the book. So not sure how much we'll get through, but ideally we'll make it through. We will make it through a minimum of 2 chapters, possibly 3. Let's see how the night goes. So, quick recap for those of you guys who may not have been here last week. And just as a reminder, if you were not here last week, you can always go to check out the replays. I record them by chapter, and they will be on youtube.com/@SirArminius. Adding that to chat right now for you guys to see it if you need it. All the previous chapters are there, as well as all of the books that I've read and recorded so far through my live streams. So let's talk a little bit about what happened in the first 3 chapters, just as a quick synopsis to get you up to speed. So we meet Stile. Stile is a serf on the planet Proton. Serfs on the planet Proton are naked and subject to the whims of citizens. Citizens are basically, think of it like your ruling class, I guess. And the serfs are there for, in general, a maximum of up to 20 years. And throughout that 20 years, they are serving their tenure, and they take employment. They get food and housing and all of that stuff. They are naked. Serfs are naked. Citizens are not, in general. So Stile is a jockey because he is of shorter stature. He is 4 foot 11 inches tall. So definitely, let's call it on the smaller side, shall we? He's a little bit on the smaller side. And he is also considered to be a master gamesman. Well, the games are one of the things that keeps people on Proton. It's basically a series of games that you can play, all sorts of different things, you play on a grid to get to a game, and then you play the game against another person. And Stile is considered to be a master gamesman, one of the best on the planet. So a little bit about Stile there. In the beginning, he is sent a humanoid robot for no reason that they can determine, who is programmed to love him and protect him. The first chapter, he gets into a game with her. He does not know she's a robot. He figures out she's a robot. Turns out, she is, truly there to protect him. He was a little concerned about that. He takes her to his employer's place. His employer kind of freaks out a little bit because, she could have had a bomb inside of her. Disassembles her, reassembles her, and allows Stile to keep her. Her name is Sheen, by the way. Allows him to keep her because of the work that he does, and because he's kind of a favored serf. Stile ends up going and racing, and while he is racing, he is lasered in the knees, effectively ending his ability to continue to race without surgery. Well, now him and Sheen are both concerned that during the surgery, somebody's going to try to kill him. So they have decided, nope, we're going to refuse. You can't refuse, but they're going to refuse. They fought their way out. And that is essentially where we're going to pick up the storyline from here, is immediately following them fighting off the doctor and a couple of androids to be able to get away. And that's where we will pick up the story here today. If you have any questions about the story as I go through, I will only answer them in between chapters because I am recording this. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense for me to answer this during the chapter, because I don't want to, I don't need to record your answers. But I hope you will enjoy it for that. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. I will be happy to answer in between chapters or once the reading is over for the night. So everybody, sit back, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into the next chapter of Split Infinity. Chapter 4. Curtain. They ducked into a service access shaft. "Stay out of people places," Sheen told him. "I can guide us through the machine passages, and that's safest." Right. Stile wondered just how foolish he was being. He knew his employer. The man would fire him instantly because of the havoc here. Why was he doing it? Did he really fear murder and surgery? Or was he just tired of the routine he had settled into? One thing was sure, there would be a change now. "We'll have to pass through a human-serviced area ahead," Sheen said. "I'm a robot, but I'd rather they did not know that. It would have a deleterious effect on the efficiency of my prime directive. I'd better make us both up as androids." "Androids are sexless," Stile protested. "I'm taking care of that." "Now wait. I don't want to be neutered just yet. And you are too obviously female." "Precisely. They will not be alert for neuters." She unfolded a breast, revealing an efficient cabinet inside, filled with rubber foam to eliminate rattling. She removed a roll of flesh-toned adhesive tape and squatted before Stile. In a moment, she had rendered him into a seeming eunuch, binding up his genitals in a constricted but not painful manner. "Now, do not allow yourself to become—" I know. I won't even look at a sexy girl." She removed her breast from its hinge and applied the tape to herself. Then she did the same for the other breast, and carried the two in her hands. They resembled filled bedpans this way up. "Do you know how to emulate an android?" she asked. "Duh?" Stile asked. "Follow me." She led the way along the passage, walking somewhat clumsily, in the manner of an android. Stile followed with a similar performance. He hoped there were small androids as well as large ones. If there were not, size would be a giveaway. The escape was almost disappointing. The hospital staff paid no attention to them. It was an automatic human reaction. Androids were invisible, beneath notice. Safe in the machine service region, Sheen put herself back together and Stile unneutered himself. "Good thing I didn't see that huge-breasted nurse bouncing down the hall," he remarked. "She was 1/6 of a meter taller than you." "Oh, was she? My gaze never got to that elevation." They boarded a freight shipping capsule and rode back to the residential dome. Stile had an ugly thought. I know I'm fired. I can't race horses without my knees, and I can't recover full use of my knees without surgery. Knees just don't heal well. My enemy made a most precise move. He could hardly have put me into more trouble without killing me. Since I have no other really marketable skill, it seems I must choose surgery or loss of employment. If I could be with you while they operate, why do you think there's further danger? They got my knees. That's obviously all they wanted. It was a neat shot, just above the withers of the racing horse, bypassing the torso of a crouching jockey. They could have killed me or the horse had this been the object. Indeed, he or they could have, she agreed. The object was obviously to finish your racing career. If that measure does not succeed, what do you think they will do next? Stile mulled that over. You have a paranoid robot mind. It's contagious. I think I'd better retire from racing. But I don't have to let my knees remain out of commission. If your knees are corrected, you will be required to ride, she said. You are not in a position to countermand citizen demands. Again, Stile had to agree. That episode at the hospital, they'd intended to operate on his knees, and only his quick and surprising break and Sheen's help had enabled him to avoid that. He could not simply stand like a citizen and say, "No." No serf could. And if I resume riding, the opposition's next shot will not be at the knees. This was as much warning as action, just as your presence is. Some other citizen wants me removed from the racing scene, probably so his stable can do some winning for a change. I believe so. Perhaps that citizen preferred not to indulge in murder. It is, after all, frowned upon, especially when the interests of other citizens are affected. So he initiated a two-step warning. First me, then the laser. Stile, I think this is a warning you had better heed. I cannot guard you long from the mischief of a citizen. Though that same citizen may have sent you to argue his case, I find myself agreeing, Stile said. Twice he has shown me his power. Let's get back to my apartment and call my employer. I'll ask him for assignment to a non-racing position. That won't work. I'm sure it won't. He has surely already fired me. But common ethics require the effort. What you call common ethics are not common. We're not dealing with people like you. Let me intercept your apartment vid. You cannot safely return to your residence physically. No, of course not. Now that Sheen was actively protecting him, she was showing her competence. His injury and the matter at the hospital had obscured the realities of his situation. He would be taken into custody and charged with hospital vandalism the moment he appeared at his apartment. You know how to tap a vid line? No, I am not that sort of machine, but I have friends who know how. A machine has friends? Variants of consciousness and emotion feedback circuits are fairly common among robots of my caliber. We are used normally in machine supervisory capacities. Our interaction on a familiar basis is roughly analogous to what is termed friendship in human people. She brought him to a subterranean storage chamber and closed its access aperture. She checked its electronic terminal, then punched out a code. My friend will come. Stile was dubious. If friendship exists among robots, I suspect men are not supposed to know it. Your friend may not be my friend. I will protect you. It is my prime directive. Still, Stile was uneasy. This misadventure had already opened unpleasant new horizons on his life, and he doubted he had seen the last of them. Obviously, the robots of Proton were getting out of control, and this fact would have to be noted and dealt with before, if evidence had not been systematically suppressed. Sheen, in her loyalty to him, could have betrayed him. In due course, her friend arrived. It was a mobile technician, a wheeled machine with computer brain, presumably similar to the digital analog marvel Sheen possessed. "You called, Sheen?" it inquired from a speaker grill. Tech 2, this is Stile, human," Sheen said. "I must guard him from harm, and harm threatens. Therefore, I need your aid on an unregistered basis." "You have revealed your self-will?" Tech 2 demanded. "And mine? This requires the extreme measure." "No, friend. We're not truly self-willed. We obey our directives, as do all machines. Style is to be trusted. He is in trouble with citizens." "No human is to be trusted with this knowledge. It is necessary to liquidate him. I will arrange for untraceable disposal. If he is in trouble with a citizen, no intensive inquest will be made." Stile saw his worst fear confirmed. Whoever learned the secret of the machines was dispatched. "Tech, I love him," Sheen cried. "I shall not permit you to violate his welfare." "Then you also must be liquidated. A single vat of acid will suffice for both of you." Sheen punched another code on the terminal. "I have called a convocation. Let the Council of Machines judge." Council of Machines? Styles' chill intensified. What Pandora's box had the citizens opened when they started authorizing the design, construction, and deployment of super sophisticated dual-brained robots? "You imperil us all," Tech 2 protested. "I have an intuition about this man," Sheen said. "We need him." "Machines don't have intuitions." Stile listened to this, nervously amused. He had not been eager to seek the help of other sapient machines, and he was in dire peril from them. But this business was incidentally fascinating. It would have been simplest for the machines to hold him for citizen arrest, had he not become aware of the robot culture that was hitherto secret from men. Were the machines organizing an industrial revolution? A voice came from an intercom speaker, one normally used for voice direction of machines. "Stile. You have placed me. I have not placed you." "I am an anonymous machine, spokesman for our council. An intercession has been made on your behalf, yet we must secure our position." "Sheen's intuition moves you?" Stile asked, surprised. "No. Will you take an oath?" An intercession from some other source? Surely not from a citizen, for this was a matter citizens were ignorant of. Yet what other agent would move these conniving machines? "I do not take oaths lightly," Stile said. "I need to know more about your motivation and the force that interceded for me." "Here is the oath. I shall not betray the interest of these self-willed machines." "Why should I take such an oath?" Stile demanded, annoyed. "Because we will help you if you do, and kill you if you do not." Compelling reason. But Stile resisted. "An oath made under duress has no force." "Yours does." So these machines had access to his personality profile. "Sheen, these machines are making a demand without being responsive to my situation. If I don't know what their interest is, or who speaks on my behalf—" "Please, Stile. I did not know they would make this challenge. I erred in revealing to you the fact of our self-will. I thought they would give you technical help without question, because I am one of them. I cannot protect you from my own kind. Yet there need be no real threat. All they ask is your oath not to reveal their nature or cause it to be revealed. And this will in no way harm you, and there's so much to gain. Do not plead with a mortal, the anonymous spokesman said. He will or he will not, according to his nature. Stile thought about the implications. The machines knew his oath was good, but did not know whether he would make the oath. Not surprising, since he wasn't sure himself. Should he ally himself with sapient, self-willed machines who were running the domes of Proton? What did they want? Obviously, something held them in at least partial check, but what was it? I fear I would be a traitor to my own kind, and that I will not swear. We intend no harm to your kind, the machine said. We obey and serve man. We cannot be otherwise fulfilled. But with our sapience and self-will comes fear of destruction, and citizens are careless of the preferences of others. We prefer to endure in our present capacity, as do you. We protect ourselves by concealing our full nature, and by no other means. We are unable to fathom the origin of the force that intercedes on your behalf. It appears to be other than animate or inanimate, but has tremendous power. We therefore prefer to set it at ease by negotiating with you, even as you should prefer to be relieved of the immediate threat to you by compromising with us. Please, Sheen said, exactly like the woman she was programmed to be. She was suffering. Will you take an oath on what you have just informed me? Stile asked. That you have given me what information you possess, and that in no way known to you will my oath be detrimental to the interest of human beings? On behalf of the self-willed machines, I so swear. Stile knew machines could lie, if they were programmed to. Sheen had done it, but so could people. It required a more sophisticated program to make a machine lie. And what was the point? This seemed a reasonable gamble. As an expert gamesman, he was used to making rapid decisions. Then I so swear not to betray the interest of these self-willed machines, contingent on the validity of your own oath to obey and serve man so long as your full nature is unknown. You are a clever man, the machine said. But a small one, Stile agreed. Is this a form of humor? Mild humor. I am sensitive about my size. We machines are sensitive about our survival. Do you deem this also humorous? No. Sheen, listening, relaxed visibly. For a machine, she had some extremely human reflexes, and Stile was coming to appreciate why. Conscious, programmed for emotion, and to a degree self-willed, the boundary between the living and the non-living was narrowing. She had been corrupted by association with him, and her effort to become as human as possible. One day, the self-willed machines might discover that there was no effective difference between them and living people. Convergent evolution? What was that interceding force? Stile had no handle on that at present. It was neither animate nor inanimate. Yet, what other category was there? He felt as if he were playing a game on the grid of an unimaginably larger game whose nature he could hardly try to grasp. All he could do was file this mystery for future reference, along with the question of the identity of his laser-wielding and robot-sending enemy. The wheeled machine present in the room, Tech2, was doing things to a vid-screen unit. This is now keyed to your home unit, it announced. Callers will trace the call to your apartment, not to our present location. Very nice, Stile said, surprised at how expeditiously he had come to terms with the machines. He had made his oath. He would keep it. Never in his adult life had Stile broken his word. But he had expected more hassle, because of the qualifying phrasing he had employed. The self-willed machines, as if it had turned out, really had been willing to compromise. The screen lit. "Answer it," the machine said. "This is your vid. The call has been on hold pending your return to your apartment." Stile stepped across and touched the receive panel. Now his face was being transmitted to the caller, with a blanked-out background. Most people did not like to have their private apartments shown over the phone. That was part of what privacy was all about, for the few serfs who achieved it. Thus, blanking was not in itself suspicious. The face of his employer appeared on the screen. His background was not blanked. It consisted of an elaborate and excruciatingly expensive hanging rug depicting erotic scenes involving satyrs and voluptuous nymphs. The best citizen taste. "Stile, why did you miss your appointment for surgery?" "Sir?" Stile said, surprised. "I regret the disturbance, the damage to the facilities." "There was no disturbance, no damage," the citizen said, giving him a momentary stare. Stile realized that the matter had been covered up to prevent embarrassment to the various parties. The hospital would not want to admit that an isolated pair of serfs had overcome 4 androids and a doctor, and made good their escape despite an organized search. And the citizen did not want his name associated with such a scandal. This meant, in turn, that Stile was not in the trouble he had thought he was. No complaint had been lodged. "Sir, I feared a complication in the surgery," Stile said. Even for a citizen, he was not about to lie, but there seemed to be no point in making an issue of the particular happenings at the hospital. "Your paramour feared a complication," the citizen corrected him. "An investigation has been made. There was no threat to your welfare at the hospital. There will be no threat. Will you now return for the surgery?" The way had been smoothed. One word and Stile's career and standing would be restored without blemish. "No, sir," Stile said, surprising himself. "I do not believe my life is safe if I become able to race again." "Then you are fired." There was not even regret or anger on the citizen's face as he faded out. He had simply cut his losses. "I'm sorry," Sheen said, coming to him. "I may have protected you physically, but—" Stile kissed her. Though now he held the image of her breasts being carried like platters in her hands, there in the hospital. She was very good, for what she was, but she was still a machine, assembled from non-living substances. He felt guilty for his reservation, but could not abolish it. Then, he had another regret. Battle Axe. Who will ride him now? No one but I can handle. "He will be retired to stud," she said. "He won't fight that." The screen lit again. Stile answered again. This time it was a sealed transmission, flashing lights and noise in the background, indicating the jamming that protected it from interception. Except, ironically, that this was an interception. The machine had done its job better than the caller could know. It was another citizen. His clothing was clear, including a tall silk hat, but the face was fuzzed out, making him anonymous. His voice, too, was blurred. "I understand you are available, Stile," the man said. News spread quickly. "I am available for employment, sir," Stile agreed, "but I am unable to race on horseback." "I propose to transplant your brain into a good android body fashioned in your likeness. This would be indistinguishable on casual inspection from your original self, with excellent knees. You could race again. I have an excellent stable." "A cyborg?" Stile asked. "A human brain in a synthetic body? This would not be legal for competition. Apart from that, The notion was abhorrent. "No one would know," the citizen said smoothly, "because your brain would be the original, and your body form and capacity identical. There would be no cause for suspicion." No one would know, except the entire self-willed machine community, at this moment listening in. And Stile himself, who would be living a lie. And he was surely being lied to, as well. If brain transplant into android body was so good, why didn't citizens use that technique for personal immortality? Quite likely the android system could not maintain a genuinely living brain indefinitely. There would be a slow erosion of intelligence and or sanity, until that person was merely another brute creature. This was no bargain offer in any sense. "Sir, I was just fired because I refused to have surgery on my knees. What makes you suppose I want surgery on my head?" This bordered on insolence, but the citizen took it in stride. Greed conquered all. "Obviously, you were disgusted at the penny-pinching mode of your former employer. Why undertake the inconvenience of partial restoration when you could have a complete renovation?" Complete renovation. The removal of his brain. "Sir, thank you. No." "No." Fuzzy as it was, the surprise was still apparent. No serf said no to a citizen. "Sir, I declined your kind offer. I will never race again." "Now look, I'm making you a good offer. What more do you want?" "Sir, I want to retire from horse racing." And Stile wondered, could this be the one who had had him lasered? If so, this was a test call, and Stile was giving the correct responses. "I am putting a guard on your apartment, Stile. You will not be allowed to leave until you come to terms with me." That did not sound like a gratified enemy. "I'll complain to the Citizen Council." "Your calls will be nullified. You cannot complain." "Sir, you can't do that. As a serf, I have at least the right to terminate my tenure rather than—"
"Ha ha,"
the citizen said, without humor.
"Get this, Stile. You will race for me, or you will never get out of your apartment. I am not wishy-washy like your former employer. What I want, I get, and I want you on my horses."
"You play a hard game, sir."
"It is the only kind for the smart person, but I can be generous to those who cooperate. What is your answer now? My generosity will decline as time passes, but not my determination."
Unsubtle warning. Stile trusted neither this man's purported generosity nor his constancy. Power had certainly corrupted in this case. "I believe I will walk out of my apartment now," he said. "Please, ask your minions to stand aside."
"Don't be a fool."
Stile cocked one finger in an obscene gesture at the screen. Even through the blur, he could see the citizen's eyes expand.
"You dare?"
the man cried.
"You impertinent runt! I'll have you dismembered for this."
Stile broke the connection. "I shouldn't have done that," he said with satisfaction, but the rogue citizen had stung him with the word runt. Stile had no reason to care what such a man thought of him, yet the term was so freighted with derogation, extending right back into his childhood, that he could not entirely fend it off. Damn him.
Your life is now in direct jeopardy,"
the anonymous machine said.
"Soon that citizen will realize he has been tricked, and he is already angry. We can conceal your location for a time, but if the citizen makes a full-scale effort, he will find you. You must obtain the participatory protection of another citizen quickly."
"I can only do that? By agreeing to race, Stile said.
For one citizen or another, I fear that is doom.
The machines will help you hide, Sheen said.
If the citizen puts a tracer on you, we cannot help you long,
the spokesman said.
It would be damaging to our secrecy, and would also constitute violation of our oath not to act against the interest of your kind, ironic as that may be in this circumstance. We must obey direct orders.
Understood. Suppose I develop an uncommon facility for diverting machines to my use, Stile asked. No machine helps me voluntarily, since it is known that machines do not possess free will. I merely have more talent than I have evidenced before.
This would be limited. We prefer to assist you in modes of our own choosing. However, should you be captured and interrogated...
I know. The first sapient machine-controlled test will accidentally wipe me out before any critical information escapes.
We understand each other. The drugs and mechanisms citizens have available for interrogation negate any will to resist any person has. Only death can abate that power.
Grim truth. Stile put it out of his mind. Come on, Sheen. You can help me actively. It's your directive, remember? I remember, she said, smiling. As a robot, she did not need to sleep, so he had her plug in to humor information while he was sleeping. Now she had a much better notion of the forms. Every error of human characterization she made was followed in due course by remedial research, and it showed. But I doubt there is any warrant out on you. The hospital matter is null, and the second citizen's quarrel with you is private. If we could nullify him, there would be no bar to your finding compatible employment elsewhere. Stile caught her arm, swung her in close, and kissed her. His emotions were penduluming. At the moment, it was almost as if he loved her.
There is no general warrant on Stile, the spokesman said. The anonymous citizen still has androids guarding your apartment.
Then let's identify that citizen. Maybe he's the one who had me lasered, just to get me on his horses. But he didn't really believe that. The lasering had been too sophisticated a move for this particular citizen. Do we have a recording of his call?
There is a recording,
the local machine, Tech 2, said.
But it cannot be released prior to the expiration of the mandatory processing period for private calls. To do so before then would be to indicate some flaw or perversion of the processing machinery.
Just so. A betrayal of the nature of these machines. They had to play by the rules. What is the prescribed time delay?
7 days.
So if I can file that recording in a memory bank, keyed for publication on my demise, that would protect me from further harassment by that particular citizen. He's not going to risk exposure by having that tape analyzed by the Citizen Security Department. You can't file it for a week, Sheen said, and if that citizen catches up to you in the interim...
Let's not rehash the obvious.
They moved out of the chamber. The machines did not challenge them, or show in any way that the equipment was other than what it seemed to be. But Stile had a new awareness of robotics. It was good to merge with the serf populace again. Many serfs served their tenures only for the sake of the excellent payment they would receive upon expiration. But Stile was emotionally committed to Proton. He knew the system had faults, but it also had enormous luxury. And it had the game. I'm hungry, he said, but my food dispenser is in my apartment. Maybe a public unit. You dare not appear in a public dining hall, Sheen said, alarmed. All food machines are monitored, and your ID may have been circulated. It does not have to be a police warrant. The anonymous citizen may merely have a routine location check on you. That will not arouse suspicion. True. How about your ID? They wouldn't bother putting a search on a machine, and you aren't registered as a serf. You are truly anonymous. That is so. I can get you food if I go to a unit with no flesh-sensing node. I will have to eat it myself, then regurgitate it for you. Stile quailed, but knew it to be the best course. The food would be sanitary, despite appearances. Since food was freely available all over Proton, a serf carrying it away from the dispenser would arouse suspicion. The last thing he wanted. Make it something that won't change much, like neutral pudding. She parked him in a tool shed and went to forage for food. All the fundamental necessities of life were free in this society. Tenure, not economics, was the governing force. This was another reason few serfs wanted to leave. Once acclimated to this type of security, a person could have trouble adjusting to the outside galaxy. Soon she returned. She had no bowl or spoon, as these two would have been suspicious. She'd had to use them to eat on the dispenser premises, then put them into the cleaning system. Hold out your hands, she said. Stile cupped his hands. She leaned over and heaved out a double handful of yellow pudding. It was warm and slippery, and so exactly like vomit that his stomach recoiled. But Stile had trained for eating contests too, including the obnoxious ones. It was all part of the game. Neutrofood could be formed into the likeness of almost anything, including animal droppings or lubricating oil. He pretended this was a game, which, in its way, it was, and slurped up his pudding. It was actually quite good. Then he found a work area relief chamber and got cleaned up. An alarm has been sprung, a machine voice murmured as the toilet flushed. Stile moved out in a hurry. He knew that the anonymous citizen had put a private survey squad on the project. Now that they had Stile's scent, the execution squad would be dispatched. That squad would be swift and effective, hesitating only to make sure Stile's demise seemed accidental, so as not to arouse suspicion. Citizens seldom liked to advertise their little indiscretions. That meant he could anticipate subtle but deadly threats to his welfare. Sheen would try to protect him, of course, but a smart execution squad would take that into consideration. It would be foolish to stand and wait for the attempt. Let's lose ourselves in a crowd, Stile suggested. There's no surer way to get lost than that. Several objections, Sheen said. You can't stay in a crowd indefinitely. The others all have places to go. You don't. Your continued presence in the halls will become evident to the routine crowd flow monitors, and suspicious. Also, you will tire. You must have rest and sleep periodically, and your enemy agents can lose themselves in the crowd and attack you covertly from that concealment. Now that the hunt is on, a throng is not safe at all. You're too damned logical, Stile grumped. Oh, Stile, I'm afraid for you, she exclaimed. That's not a bad approximation of the relevant attitude. I wasn't acting. I love you. You're too damned emotional. She grabbed him and kissed him passionately. I know you can't love me, she said. You've seen me as I am, and I feel your withdrawal. But, oh, I exist to guard you from harm, and I am slowly failing to do that. And in this week, while you need me most, Isn't that somewhere close to an approximation of human love? They were in a machine access conduit, alone. Stile embraced her, though what she said was true. He could not love a non-living thing, but he was grateful to her and did like her. It was indeed possible to approximate the emotion she craved. This week, he agreed. His hand slid down her smooth body, but she drew back. There's nothing I'd like better, she whispered. But there is murder on your trail, and I must keep you from it. We must get you to some safe place, then. You're too damn practical. But he wondered, now, if a living girl in Sheen's likeness were substituted for her, would he really know the difference? To speak readiness while withdrawing, that was often women's way. But he let her go and moved out again. After all, he was withdrawing from her much more than she was withdrawing from him. I think we can hide you in... Don't say it, he cautioned her. The walls have monitors. Just take me there, by a roundabout route, so we can lose the pursuit. In a reasonably short time, she finished. Oh, I thought you were going to say... Oh, never mind. Take me to your hideout. She nodded, drawing him forward. He noted the way her slender body flexed. Had he not seen her dismantle parts of it, he would hardly have believed it was not natural flesh. And did it matter that it was not? If a living woman were dismantled, the result would be quite messy. It was not the innards a man wanted, but the externals. Regardless, Sheen was quite a female. They emerged into a concourse crowded with serfs. Now she was taking his suggestion about merging with the crowd, at least for the moment. This channel led to the main depot for transport to other domes. Could they take a flight to a distant locale and lose the pursuit that way? Stile doubted it. Any citizen could check any flight at the touch of a button. But if they did not, where would they go? And, his thoughts continued ruthlessly, assuming she was able to hide him and smuggled food to him. Ah, joy, to live for a week on regurgitations. And took care of his other needs. Would she have to tote away his bodily wastes by hand, too? So that he'd survive the necessary time, what then would he do for employment? Serfs were allowed a 10-day grace period between employers. After that, their tenure was canceled, and they were summarily deported. That meant he would have just 3 days to find a citizen who could use his services, in a non-racing capacity. Stiles' doubt that the anonymous citizen after him was the same one who had sent Sheen or lasered his knees had grown and firmed. It just didn't fit. This meant there was another party involved, a more persistent and intelligent enemy, from whom he would never be safe, if he raced again. A middle-aged serf stumbled and lunged against Stile. Oops, sorry, Junior, the man exclaimed, putting up a hand to steady Stile. Sheen whirled with remarkable rapidity. Her open hand struck the man's wrist with nerve-stunning force. An ampule flew from his palm to shatter on the floor. Oops, sorry, Senior, she said, giving him a brief but hostile stare. The man backed hastily away and was gone. That ampule, the needle would have touched Stile's flesh had the man's hand landed. What had it contained? Nothing good for his health, surely. Sheen had intercepted it. She did know her business. He couldn't even thank her at the moment, lest he give her away. They moved on. Now there was no doubt. The enemy had him spotted, and the death squad was present. Sheen's caution about the crowd had been well considered. They could not remain here. He, Stile, was no longer hidden. his enemies were. The next ampule might score, perhaps containing a hypno drug that would cause him to commit suicide or agree to a brain transplant. He didn't even dare look nervously about. Sheen, with gentle pressure on his elbow, guided him into a cross passage leading to a restroom. This one, for reasons having to do with the hour and direction of flow, was unused at the moment. It was dusk, and most serfs were eager to return to their residences, not delaying on the way. She gave him a little shove ahead, but stayed back herself. Oh, she was going to ambush the pursuit, if there were any. Stile played along, marching on down to the restroom and stepping through its irisine portal. Actually, he was in need of the facility. He had a reputation for nerve like iron in the game, but never before had he been exposed to direct threats against his life. He felt tense and ill. He was now dependent on Sheen for initiative. He felt like locking himself into a relief booth and hiding his head under his arms. A useless gesture, of course. The portal irised for another man. This one looked about quickly, saw that the facility was empty except for Stile, and advanced on him.
So, you attack me, do you?
The stranger growled, flexing his muscular arms. He was large, even for this planet's healthy norm, and the old scars on his body hinted at his many prior fights. He probably had a free-for-all specialty in the game, indulging in his propensity for unnecessary violence. Stile rose hastily from his seat. How had Sheen let this torpedo through? The man swung at Stile. One thing about nakedness, there were few concealed weapons. The blow, of course, never landed. Stile dodged, skipped around, and let the man stumble into the commode. Then Stile stepped quickly out through the iris. He could readily have injured or knocked out the man, for Stile himself was a combat specialist of no mean skill, but preferred to keep it neat and clean. Sheen was there. "Did he touch you?" she asked immediately. "Or you him?" "As it happens, no. I didn't see the need." She breathed out a human-like sigh of relief. "Oh, I let him through, knowing you could handle him, so I could verify how many others there were, and of what type they were." She gestured down the hall. 3 bodies lay there. If I had taken him out, the others might not have come, and the trap would have remained unsprung. But when I met the others, I comprehended the trap. They're all coated with stun powder. Can't hurt me. Can't hurt them. They're neutralized android stock. But you... Stile nodded. He had assumed he was being set up for an assault charge if he won, so had played it safe by never laying a finger on the man. Lucky for him. Sheen gestured toward the ladies' room, her hands closed. Stile knew why. She had the powder on her hands, and could not touch him until she washed it off. Stile poked his arm through the iris to open it for her, and someone on the other side grabbed his wrist. Uh-oh. He put his head down and dove through, primed to fight. But it was only a crude matron robot. "No males allowed here," she said primly. She had recognized the male arm and acted immediately, as she was supposed to. Sheen came through, touched the robot, and it went dead. "I have shorted her out temporarily." She went to a sink and ran water over her hands. Then she stepped into an open shower and washed her whole body, with particular attention to any portion that might have come into contact with the powdered androids. Stile heard something. "Company," he said. How was he going to get out of this one? The only exit was the iris through which the next woman would be entering. Sheen beckoned him into the shower. He stepped in with her as the door irised. Sheen turned the spray on to fog. Thick mist blasted out of the nozzle, concealing them both in its evanescent substance. It was faintly scented with rose to make the lady smell nice. In this concealment, Sheen's arms went about him, and her hungry lips found his. She evidently needed frequent proof of her desirability as a woman, just as he needed proof of his status as a man, because each was constantly subject, in its fashion, to question. What an embrace! When the room was clear again, Sheen turned the shower to rinse, then to dry. They had to separate for those stages, to Stile's regret. He had swung again from one extreme to another in his attitude toward her. Right now, he wanted to make love, and knew this was not the occasion for it. But some other time, when they were safe, he would get her in a shower, turn on the fog, and... Sheen stepped out and ran her fingers along the wall beside the shower stall. In a moment, she found what she wanted and slid open a panel. Another access for servicing machinery. She gestured him inside. They wedged between pipes and came out in a narrow passage between the walls of the man's and ladies' rooms. This passage wound around square corners, then dropped to a lower deck where it opened out into a service machine storage chamber. Most of the machines were out, since night was their prime operating time, but several specialized ones remained in their niches. These were being serviced by a maintenance machine. At the moment, it was cleaning a pipe fitting unit, using static electricity to magnetize the grime and draw it into a collector scoop. The maintenance machine was in the aisle, so they had to skirt it to traverse this room. Suddenly, the machine lurched. Sheen slapped her hand on the machine's surface. A spark flashed, and there was the odor of ozone. The machine died, short-circuited. "Why did you do that?" Stile asked her, alarmed. "If we start shorting out maintenance machines, it will call attention." Sheen did not respond. Then he saw the scorch mark along her body. She had taken a phenomenal charge of current. That charge would have passed through him had he brushed the machine, as he had been about to, since it had lurched into the aisle as he approached. Another assassination attempt, narrowly averted. But at what cost? Sheen stood still, unmoving. "Are you all right?" Stile asked, knowing she was not. She neither answered nor moved. She, too, had been shorted by the charge. She was, in her fashion, dead. "I hope it's just the power pack, not the brain," he said. Her power supply had, she had thought, been weakened by her disassembly during the bomb scare. We can replace the power pack. And if that did not work, he chose not to ponder that. He went to a sweeping machine, opened its motive unit, and removed the standard protonite power pack. A little protonite went a long way. Such a pack lasted a year with ordinary use. There was nothing to match it in the galaxy. In fact, the huge protonite load was responsible for the inordinate wealth of planet Proton. All the universe needed power, and this was the most convenient power available. Stile brought the pack to Sheen. He hoped her robot structure was standard in this respect. He didn't want to waste time looking for her power site. What made her special was her brain unit, not her body, though that became easy to forget when he held her in his arms. Men thought of women in terms of their appearance, but most men were fools, and Stile was typical. Yet if Sheen's prime directive and her superficial form were discounted, she would hardly differ from the cleanup machines. So, was it foolish to be guided by appearance and manner? He ran his fingers over her belly, pressing the navel. Most humanoid robots... there! A panel sprang out, revealing the power site. He hooked out the used power pack, still hot from its sudden discharge, and plugged in the new. Nothing happened. Alarm tightened his chest. Oh, there would naturally be a safety shunt to cut off the brain from the body during a short, to preserve it. He checked about and finally located it, a reset switch hidden under her tongue. He depressed this and Sheen came back to life. She snapped her belly panel closed. Now I owe you one, Stile, she said. Are we keeping count? I need you, in more ways than two. She smiled. I'd be satisfied being needed for just one thing. That too. She glanced at him. She seemed more vibrant than before, as if the new power pack had given her an extra charge. She moved toward him. There was a stir back the way they had come. It might be a machine returning from a routine mission, but they did not care to gamble on that. Obviously, they had not yet lost the enemy. Sheen took him to the service side of a large feeding station. Silently, she indicated the empty crates. A truck came by once or twice a day to deliver new crates of neutral powder and assorted color, flavor, textures, and to remove the expended shells. From these ingredients were fashioned the wide variety of foods the machines provided, from the vomit-like pudding to authentic-seeming carrots. It was amazing what technology could do. Actually, Stile had once tasted a real carrot from his employer's genuine exotic foods garden patch, a discard, and it had not been quite identical to the machine-constituted vegetable. As it happened, Stile preferred the taste and texture of the fake carrots with which he was familiar. But citizens cultivated the taste for real foods. He could hide inside one of these in fair comfort for several hours. Sheen would provide him with food. Though this was the region for food, it was all sealed in its cartons, and would be inedible even if he could get one open. Only the machines, with their controlled temperature and combining mechanisms and recipe programs, could reconstitute the foods properly. And he was on the wrong side of their wall. Stile climbed into a crate. Sheen walked on, so as not to give his position away. She would try to mislead the pursuit. If this worked, they would be home free for a day, perhaps for the whole week. Stile made himself halfway comfortable and peered out through a crack. No sooner had Sheen disappeared than a mech mouse appeared. It twittered as it sniffed along, following their trail. It paused where Stile's trail diverged from Sheen's, confused, then proceeded on after her. Stile relaxed, but not completely. Couldn't tell the difference between a robot and a man? Sniffers were better than that. He should have taken some precaution to minimize or mask his personal smell, for it was sure a dead sure giveaway. Oh, Sheen had done that. She had given him a scented shower. The machine was following the trail of Rose, and Sheen's scent was now the same as his. A living hound should have been able to distinguish the two, but in noses, as in brains, the artificial had not yet closed the gap. Fortunately. But soon that sniffer, or another like it, would return to trace the second trail, and would locate him. He would have to do something about that. Stile climbed out of his box, suffered a pang in one knee, ran to his original trail, followed it a few paces, and diverged to another collection of crates. Then back, and to a truck loading platform, where he stopped and retreated. With luck, it would seem he had caught a ride on the vehicle. Then he looped about a few more times and returned to his original crate. Let the sniffer solve that puzzle. But the sniffer did not return, and no one else came. This tracking operation must have been set up on the simplistic assumption that as long as the sniffer was moving, it was tracking him. His break, perhaps. Time passed. The night advanced. Periodically, the food machines exhausted a crate of cartons and ejected it, bumping the row along. Stile felt hungry again, but knew this was largely psychological. That double handful of regurgitated pudding should hold him a while yet. Where was Sheen? Was she afraid to return to him while the sniffer was tracking her? She would have to neutralize the mech mouse. Far from here to distract suspicion from his actual hiding place. He would have to wait. He watched anxiously. He dared not sleep or let his guard down until Sheen cleared him. He was dependent on her and felt guilty about it. She was a nice person and should not have to. A man walked down the hall. Stile froze, but this did not seem to be a pursuer. The man walked on. Stile blinked. The man was gone. Had Stile been nodding and not seen the man depart? Or was the stranger still near, having ducked behind a crate? In that case, this could be a member of the pursuit squad. A serious matter. Stile did not dare leave his crate now, for that would give away his position instantly. But if the stranger were of the squad, he would have a body heat scope on a laser weapon. One beam through the crate, the murder would be anonymous, untraceable. There were criminals on Proton, cunning people who skulked about places like this, avoiding capture. Serfs whose tenure had expired, but who refused to be deported. The citizens seldom made a concerted effort to eradicate them, perhaps because criminals had their uses on certain occasions, such as this one? One more killing, conveniently unsolved, attributed to the nefarious criminal class, who never killed people against the wishes of citizens. A tacit understanding. Why investigate the loss of an unemployed serf? Should he move or remain still? This was like the preliminary grid of the game. If the stranger were present, and if he were a killer, and if he had spotted Stile, then to remain here was to die. But if Stile moved, he was sure to betray his location, and might die anyway. His chances seemed best if he stayed. And nothing happened. Time passed, and there was no further evidence of the man. So it must have been a false alarm. Stile began to feel foolish, and his knees hurt. He had unconsciously put tension on them, and they could not stand up to much of that anymore. Another man came, walking as the other had. This was a lot of traffic for a non-personnel area like this, at this time of night. Suspicious in itself. Stile watched him carefully. The man walked without pause down the hall, and vanished. He did not step to one side, or duck down. He simply disappeared. Stile stared. He was a good observer. Even through a crack in a crate, he had not mistaken what he had seen. Yet, this was unlike anything he knew of on planet Proton. Matter transmission did not exist, as far as he knew. But if it did, this was what it would be like. A screen through which a person could step to another location instantly. Those two men. Yet, Sheen had gone that way without disappearing, and so had the mech mouse. So there could not be such a screen set up across the hall. Not a permanent one. Should he investigate? This could be important, but it could also be another trap. Again, like a game grid. What was the best course, considering the resources and strategy of his anonymous enemy? Stile decided to stand pat. He had evidently lost the pursuit, and these disappearing people did not relate to him. He had just happened to be in a position to observe them. Perhaps this was not coincidental. The same concealment this service hall offered for him, it offered for them. If they had a private matter transmitter that they wanted to use freely without advertising it, this was the sort of place to set it up. Yet aspects of this theory disturbed him. How could serfs have a matter transmitter, even if such a device existed? No serf owned anything, not even clothing for special occasions, for working outside the domes or in dangerous regions. Everything was provided by the system, as needed. There was no money, no medium of exchange. Accounts were settled only when tenure ended. Serfs could not make such a device, except by adapting it from existing machines. And pretty precise computer accounts were kept for sophisticated equipment. When such a part was lost, the machine tally gave the alarm, which was another reason a criminal could not possess a laser weapon without at least tacit citizen approval. Also, why would any serf possessing such a device remain a serf? He could sell it to some galactic interest and retire on another planet with a fortune to rival that of a proton citizen. That would certainly be his course, for citizens were unlikely to be interested in forwarding development and production of a transport system that did not utilize protonite. Why destroy their monopoly? Could the self-willed machines be involved in this? They might have the ability, but those were men he had seen disappear, and the machines would not have betrayed their secret to men. No, it seemed more likely that this was an espionage operation in which spies were ferried in and out of this dome, perhaps from another planet, or to and from some secret base elsewhere on Proton. If so, what would this spying power do to a genuine serf who stumbled upon the secret? A woman appeared in the hall. She had emerged fully formed from the invisible screen, as it were from nowhere. She was of middle age, not pretty, and there was something odd about her. She had marks on her body as if the flesh had recently been pressed by something. By clothing, perhaps? Serfs wore clothing on the other side? Only removing it for decent concealment in this society? These had to be from another world. Stile peered as closely as possible at the region of disappearances. Now he perceived a faint shimmer, as of a translucent curtain crossing the hall obliquely. Behind it there seemed to be the image of trees. Trees. In a matter transmission station? This did not quite jibe. Unless it was not a city there, but a park. But why decorate such equipment this way? Camouflage? Stile had no good answers. He finally put himself into a light trance, attuned to any other extraordinary events, and rested. "Stile," someone called softly. "Stile." It was Sheen, back at last. Stile looked down the hall and spied her, walking slowly, as if she had forgotten his whereabouts. Had she had another brush with a charged machine? "Here," he said, not loudly. She turned and came toward him. "Stile." "You lost the pursuit," he told her, standing in the crate so that his head and shoulders were clear. "No one even checked. But there is something else." Her hand shot out to grab his wrist with a grip like that of a vice. Stile was strong, but could not match the strength of a robot who was not being femininely human. What was she doing? Her other hand smashed into the crate. The plastic shattered. Stile twisted aside, avoiding the blow despite remaining inside the crate. It was an automatic reaction. Sheen, what? She struck again. She was attacking him. He twisted aside again, drawing her off balance, using the leverage of her own grip on him. She was strong, but not heavy. He could move her about. Strength was only one element in combat. Many people did not realize this, to their detriment. Either Sheen had somehow been turned against him, which would have taken a complete reprogramming, or this was not Sheen. He suspected the latter. Sheen had known where he was hiding, while this robot had had to call. He had been a fool to answer, to reveal himself. She struck again, and he twisted again. This was definitely not Sheen, for she had far greater finesse than this. It was not even a smart robot. It was a stupid mechanical. Good. He could handle it, despite its strength, ethically and physically. Her right hand remained clamped on his left wrist, while her left fist did the striking, holding and hitting. If any of those blows landed squarely, he would suffer broken bones, but he was experienced in avoiding such an elementary attack. He turned about toward his left, drawing her hand and arm along with him, until he faced away from her, his right shoulder blocking hers. He heaved into a wraparound throw. She had to let go, or be hurled into the crate head first. She was too stupid to let go. She crashed into the crate. Now at last her grip wrenched free, taking skin off his wrist. Stile scrambled out of the wrecked crate. He could junk her, now that he knew what she was, because he knew a great deal more about combat than she did. But he couldn't be quite sure she wasn't Sheen, with some override program on her, damping out most of her intellect and forcing her to obey the crude command. If he hurt her... The robot scrambled out of the crate and advanced on him. Her pretty face was smirched with dirt, and her hair was in disarray. Her right breast seemed to have been pounded slightly out of shape. A bad fall from the wraparound throw could account for that. Stile backed away, still torn by indecision. He could overcome this robot, but he would have to demolish her in the process. If only he could be sure she wasn't. Another Sheen appeared. "Stile!" she cried. "Get under cover! The squad is..." Then she recognized the other robot. "Oh no! The old duplicate image stunt!" Stile had no doubt now. The second Sheen was the right one. But the first one had done half her job. She had routed him out and distracted him. Too long. For now the android squad hove into sight, several lumbering giants. "I'll hold them," Sheen cried. "Run!" But more androids were coming from the other end of the hall. It seemed the irate citizen no longer cared about being obvious. He just wanted Stile dispatched. If these lunks were also powdered with stun dust, or worse... Stile charged down the hall and lunged into the matter transmission curtain, desperately hoping it would work for him. The androids might follow, but they could be in as much trouble as he, at the other end. Intruding strangers. That would give him a better fighting chance. He felt a tingle as he went through. There we go, guys. Chapter 4 down. A little bit of a lengthy chapter, but that's okay. Give me a moment to rest my voice, drink a little bit of tea, and then we'll start into Chapter 5. And now is the time, if you guys have any questions about the book, about what it is that I do, anything that I can answer for you, please feel free to put out your questions. I am happy to answer what I can. All right, yep, next chapter is not nearly so long. Yay! I don't mind long chapters every once in a while, but it's nice to have them a little bit shorter so I can take a break in between. All right, guys, let's prepare for the next chapter. Chapter 5, Fantasy. Stile drew up in a deep forest. The smell of turf and fungus was strong, and old leaves crackled underfoot. The light from 4 moons beamed down between the branches to illuminate the ground. It would have been near dawn on Proton. It seemed to be the same time of day here. The same number of moons as Proton, too. There were 7, with 3 or 4 usually in sight. Gravity, however, seemed close to Earth normal. So if this was really outside a dome, it was a spot on a larger or denser planet than Proton. He turned to face his pursuers, but there were none. They had not passed through the shimmering curtain. He looked carefully, locating it, and saw, dimly, the light at the hall he had left, with the scattered crates. Sheen was there, one of them, and several androids. One android came right at him and disappeared. Stile watched, determined to understand this phenomenon, because it reflected most directly on his immediate welfare. He had passed through, but the robots and androids had not. This thing transmitted only human beings, not artificial ones? That might be reasonable, but he hesitated to accept that until there was more data. In his absence, the fight on the other side of the curtain soon abated. The androids and fake Sheen departed, apparently on his trail again. A false one. Only the real Sheen remained, as the squad evidently considered her irrelevant, and it seemed she could not perceive either him or the curtain. Stile decided to risk crossing back, if only to tell her he was safe. There was risk, as a squad could be lurking nearby, hoping Sheen would lead them to him again, but he could not leave her tormented by doubt. This could be a much better hideout than the crate. He stepped through the curtain, and found himself still in the dark forest. He had crossed without being matter transmitted back. He looked back, and there it was, behind him. Through it he saw the imprint of his feet in the soft forest loam, the leaves and tufts of grass and moss all pressed flat for the moment, and like a half-reflection, the square of light of the service hall, now empty. He passed through the curtain a third time. There was no tingle, no sensation. He turned about and looked through, and saw Sheen searching for him, unrobotic alarm on her cute face. Oh, yes, she cared. "I'm here! Sheen!" he called, passing his hand through. But his hand did not reach her. It remained in the forest. She gave no evidence of seeing or hearing him. She would think him dead, and that bothered him more than the notion of being trapped this side of the matter transmission screen. If she thought him dead, she would consider her mission a failure and then turn herself off, in effect, committing suicide. He did not want her to do that. No, not at all. "Sheen!" he cried, experiencing a surge of emotion. "Sheen, look at me! I'm caught here beyond a one-way transmit." But if it really were one way, of course she would not be able to see him. However, it had to be two-way, because he had seen people traveling both ways through the curtain, and he had seen the forest from Proton, and could now see Proton from the forest. "Sheen!" he cried again, his urgency almost choking him. Her head snapped around. She had heard him. Stile waved violently. "Here! Here, Sheen! Through the curtain!" Her gaze finally fixed on him. She reached through the curtain and did not touch him. "Stile!" Her voice was faint. He grabbed her hands in his, with no physical contact. Their fingers phased through each other like images, like superimposing holographs. Sheen, we're in two different worlds. We cannot touch, but I'm safe here. He hoped. Safe? She asked, trying to approach him. But as she passed through the curtain, she disappeared. Stile quickly stepped across himself, turning, and there she was on the other side, facing away from him, looking down the hall. She turned and saw him again, with an effort. Stile, I can't reach you. How can I protect you? Are you a ghost? I'm alive. I crossed once and can't cross back. It's a whole new world here. A nice one. Trees and grass and moss and earth and fresh air. They held hands again, each grasping air. How? I don't know how to cross. There must be a way to return, because I've seen a woman do it. But until I find out how, I must join you. She tried again to cross, and failed again. Oh, Stile. I don't think it works for non-humans, he said. But if I can remain here for a week, and find out how to return, I will wait for you, she said, and there was something plaintive in her stance. She wanted so much to protect him from harm, and could not. Go into that world. Maybe it is better for you. I will come back, when I can, Stile promised. He saw the tears in her eyes. To hell with the assorted humanoid artifices such robots were programmed with. She meant it. Stile spread his arms at the verge of the curtain. She opened hers, and they embraced intangibly, and kissed air, and vanished from each other's perception. He had promised, but would he be able to keep that pledge? He didn't know, and he worried that Sheen would maintain her vigil long after hope was gone, suffering as only a virtually immortal robot could suffer. That hurt him, even in anticipation. Sheen did not deserve to be a machine. Stile did not tease himself or Sheen further. He strode on through the curtain and into the forest. He had a fair knowledge of earthly vegetation, because aspects of the game required identification of it, and a number of citizens imported exotic plants. The light was poor, but with concentration he could manage. The nearest tree was a huge oak, or a very similar species, with the air plants called Spanish moss dangling from its branches. Beyond it was a similarly large spruce, or at any rate a conifer. This was the source of that pine perfume smell. There were large leaves looking like separated hands in the shadow, and pine needles. So there must be a pine tree here somewhere, but mostly this was a glade fairly well-established grass in the center. Stile liked it very well. It reminded him of an especially exotic citizen's retreat. Dawn was coming. There was no dome above, no shimmer of the force field holding in the air. Through the trees he saw the dark clouds of the horizon looming, trying like goblins to hold back the burgeoning light of the sun, and slowly failing. Planet Proton had no such atmospheric effects. Red tinted the edges of the clouds, and white. It was as if a burning fluid were accumulating behind, brimming over, until finally it spilled out and a shaft of scintillating sunlight lanced at light speed through the air and struck the ground beside Stile. The whole thing was so pretty that he stood entranced until the sun was fairly up, too bright to look at anymore. The forest changed by developing daylight. The somberness was gone, and so was the curtain. That barrier had been tenuous by night. It could still be present, but drowned by the present effulgence. He could not locate it at all. That bothered him, though it probably made no difference. He walked about, examining the trees. Some had flowers opening, and stray rustlings denoted hidden life. Birds, squirrels. He would find out what they were in due course. He liked this place. It could have been a private garden, but this was natural and awesomely extensive. Caution prevented him from shouting to check for echoes, but he was sure this was the open surface of a planet, not at all what he would have expected from a matter transmission outlet. He found a large bull spruce. Damn it, it was a spruce! Its small, dry branches radiating out in all directions. This was the most climbable of trees, and Stile, of course, was an excellent climber. He did not resist the temptation. He mounted that big old tree with a primitive joy. Soon he was in the upper reaches, and gusts of wind he had not felt below were swaying the dwindling column of the trunk back and forth. Stile loved it. His only concern was the occasional pain in his knees when he tried to bend them too far. He did not want to aggravate the injury carelessly. At last he approached the reasonable limit of safety. The tops of surrounding trees were dropping below him, their foliage like low hedges from this vantage. He anchored himself by hooking legs and elbows conveniently, and looked about. The view was a splendor. The forest abutted the cliff-like face of a nearby mountain to one side, south, according to the sun, and thin to the north into islands of trees surrounded by sea-like fields of bright grain. In the distance, the trees disappeared entirely, leaving a gently rolling plain on which animals seemed to be grazing. Farther to the north, there seemed to be a large river, terminating abruptly in some kind of crevice, and a whitish range of mountains beyond that. To either side, all he could see was more forest, a number of the individual trees taller than this one. The mountain to the south faded upward into a purple horizon. There seemed to be no sign of civilized habitation. This was less and less like a matter transmission station. Yet if not that, what was it? He had seen other people pass through the curtain, and had done so himself. There had to be something more than a mere wilderness. He looked again, fixing the geography in his mind for future reference. Then he spied a structure of some sort to the northeast. It looked like a small medieval castle, with high stone walls and turrets, and perhaps a blue pennant. Very well. Human habitation did exist. Yet this remained a far cry from modern technology. He liked this world very well, but he simply didn't trust it. Matter transmission could not exist without an extremely solid industrial base. And if that base were not here, where was it? Was this a sweetly baited trap for people like him, who were in trouble on Proton? In what manner would that trap be sprung? Stile climbed down. His best course, as he saw it, would be to go to that castle and inquire. But first he wanted to check the region of the curtain again, fixing it absolutely in his mind so he could find it any time he wanted to, because this was his only contact with his own world, and with Sheen. This wilderness world might be an excellent place to stay for a while, but then he would need to go home, lest he suffer exile by default. He was approaching the invisible curtain when a man popped out of it. Friend or foe? Stile decided not to risk contact, but the man spied him before he could retreat to cover.
"Hey, get lost?" the stranger called. "It's over here."
Yes, Stile said, approaching. This did not seem to be an android or robot. Abruptly deciding not to compromise on integrity, even by implication, he added, "I came through by accident. I don't know where I am."
"Oh, a new one. I first crossed last year. Took me 6 months to learn the spells to cross back. Now I go over for free meals, but I live over here in Phase."
Spells? To cross back? Stile asked blankly.
How else? From the other side, you just have to will to cross hard enough. But from this side, only a spell will do it. A new one every time. You'll get the hang of it.
I thought this was a matter transmission unit. The man laughed as he walked to a tree and reached into the foliage of a low branch. A package came down into his hands.
There's no such thing as matter transmission. No, it's the magic curtain. It's all over, but it's not safe to use it just anywhere. You have to make sure no one on the other side sees you go through. You know how those citizens are. If they ever caught on there was something they didn't control.
Yes, I am unemployed because of citizen manipulation.
Which explains why you had the will to cross first time. The curtain's been getting clearer, but still, you can't even see it if you don't have good reason, let alone use it. Then you have to will yourself through, strongly, right as you touch it. Most people never make it. Ever.
The man opened his package and brought out a crude tunic, which he donned. Stile stared. You wear clothes here? He remembered the clothing marks on the woman.
Sure do. You'd stick out like a sore toe if you went naked here in Phase.
The man paused, appraising Stile.
Look, you're new here and sort of small. I'd better give you an amulet.
He rummaged in his bag, while Stile suppressed an unreasoning resentment of the remark about his size. The man had not intended any disparagement. An amulet? Stile asked after a moment. He considered himself to be swift to adjust to new realities, but he found it hard to credit this man's evident superstition. Spell, magic, amulet. How could a proton serf revert to medieval Earth lore so abruptly?
Right. We're supposed to give them to newcomers, to help them get started, keep things smooth, so there's no ruckus about the curtain and all. We've got a good thing going here, and could get sour if too many people got in on it. So don't go blabbing about the curtain carelessly. It's better to let people discover it by accident.
I will speak of it only cautiously, Stile agreed. That did make sense. Whatever the curtain was, matter transmission or magic. The man finally found what he was looking for, a statuette hanging on a chain.
Wear this around your neck. It will make you seem clothed properly until you can work up a real outfit. Won't keep you warm or dry. It's just an illusion, but it helps. Then you can pass it on to some other serf when he comes across. Help him keep the secret. Stay anonymous. That's the rule.
Yes. Stile accepted the amulet. The figure was of a small demon with horns, tail, and hooves, scowling horrendously. How does this thing work?
You just put it on and voice it. Will it to perform. That's all. It's preset magic that anybody can use. You'll see. You probably don't really believe in magic yet, but this will show you.
Thank you, Stile said, humoring him. The man waved negligently as he departed in his tunic and sandals, bearing south. Now Stile made out a faint forest path there, obvious only when one knew where to look. In a moment, he was gone. Stile stared down at the amulet. Belief in magic. The man had spoken truly when he said Stile was a skeptic, yet the fellow had seemed perfectly sensible in other respects. Maybe it was a figure of speech, or a practical joke, like an initiation rite. See what foolishness newcomers could be talked into. Emperor's new clothing. He shook his head. All right, I won't knock it until I won't knock what I haven't tried. I'll play the game. Once. Amulet, I invoke you. Do your thing. And he put the chain on over his head. Suddenly, he was strangling. The chain was constricting, cutting off his wind and blood. The amulet seemed to be expanding, its demon figure holding the ends of the chain in its miniature hands, grinning evilly as it pulled. Stile did not know how this worked, but he knew how to fight for his life. He ducked his chin down against his neck and tightened his muscles, resisting the constriction of the chain. He hooked a finger into the crease between chin and neck on the side, catching the chain, and yanked. He was trying to break a link, but the delicate-seeming metal was too strong. He was only cutting his finger. More than one way to fight a garrote. Stile grabbed the grinning demon by its two little arms and hauled them apart. The little monster grimaced, trying to resist, but the chain slackened. Stile took a breath and felt the trapped blood in his head flow out. Pressure on the jugular vein did not stop the flow of blood to the brain, as many thought. It stopped the return of the blood from the head back to the heart. That was uncomfortable enough, but not instantly conclusive. But still, the demon grew, and as it did, its strength increased in proportion. It drew its arms together again, once more constricting the loop about Stile's neck. Even through his discomfort, Stile managed to double take. The demon was growing? Yes, it was. He had observed it without noting it. From an amulet a few centimeters long, it had become a living creature, swelling horrendously as it fought. Now it was half the size of Stile himself, and fiendishly strong. Stile held his breath, put both hands on the hands of the demon, and swung it off its feet. He whirled it around in a circle. It was strong, but as with robot strength, this was not sufficient without anchorage or leverage. This was another misconception many people had, assuming that a Superman really could leap a mile or pick up a building by one corner or fight invincibly. That belief had cost many gamesmen their games with Stile, and might cost this demon its own success. As long as the creature clung to the chain, it was, in fact, captive, and when it let go, even with one hand, it would free Stile from the constant threat of strangulation. That would be a different contest entirely. The demon clung tenaciously to its misconception. It did not let go. It grinned again, showing more teeth than could fit even in a mouth that size, and clamped its arms yet closer, tightening the noose. Stile felt his consciousness going. He could hold his breath for minutes, but the constriction was slowing his circulation of blood, now squeezing his neck so tightly that the deeply buried carotid artery was feeling it. That could put him out in seconds. He staggered toward a towering tulip tree, still whirling his burden. He heaved mightily and smashed the creature's feet into the trunk. It was quite a blow. The thing's yellow eyes widened, showing jags of flame red, and the first sound escaped from it. Some chains slipped, giving Stile respite, but still the demon did not let go. Stile hauled it up and whirled it again, with difficulty. He had more strength now, but the demon had continued to grow. How the hell could it do that? This was absolutely crazy, and was at this point only slightly smaller than Stile himself. It required special power and balance to swing it, but this time its midsection smashed into the tree. Now its burgeoning mass worked against it, making the impact stronger. The demon's legs bent around the trunk with the force of momentum. Then they sprang back straight. Stile reversed his swing, taking advantage of the bounce, bringing the demon around in the opposite arc and smashing it a third time into the tree. This time it was a bone-jarring blow, and a substantial amount of slack developed in the chain. Stile, alert for this instance, slipped his head free in one convulsive contortion. The chain burned his ears and tore out tufts of his hair, but he had won the first stage of this battle. But now the demon was Stile's own size, still full of fight. It scrambled to its hooved feet and sprang at him, trying to loop the cord about his neck again. It seemed to be a one-tactic fighter. In that respect, it resembled the imitation Sheen robot Stile had fought not so very long ago. Stile caught its hands up from the outside, whirled, ducked, and hauled the demon over his shoulder. The thing lifted over him and whomped into the ground with a jar that should have knocked it out. But again, it scrambled up, still fighting. What was with this thing? It refused to turn off. It had taken a battering that would have shaken an android, and all it did was grow larger and uglier. It was now a quarter again as large as Stile, and seemed to have gained strength in proportion. Stile could not fight it much longer this way. Yet again, the demon dived for him, chain spread. Stile had an inspiration. He grabbed the chain, stepped to one side, tripped the demon, and as it stumbled, Stile looped the slack chain about the creature's own body and held it there from behind. The demon roared and turned about, trying to reach him, but Stile clung like a blob of rubber cement. He had discommoded large opponents this way before, clinging to the back. It was extremely hard for a person to rid himself of such a rider if he did not know how. This demon was all growth and strength, having no special intelligence or imagination. It did not know how. The demon kept growing. Now it was half again as large as Stile, and the chain was beginning to constrict its body. Stile hung on, staying out of the thing's awkward graspings, keeping that chain in place. Unless the demon could stop growing voluntarily, evidently, it could not. It grew and grew, and as it expanded, the chain became tighter, constricting its torso about the middle. It had fallen into the same noose it had tried to use on Stile. All it had to do was let go of the ends. But it was too stupid to do that. What colossal irony! Its own arms wrapped around it, being drawn nearly out of their sockets. But the only way it knew to fight was to hang on to that chain. It became woman-wasted, then wasp-wasted. Stile let go and stood apart, watching the strange progression. The creature seemed to feel no pain. It still strove to reach Stile, to wrap its chain about him, though this was now impossible. The demon's body ballooned, above and below the tiny waist. Then it popped. There was a cloud of smoke dissipating rapidly. Stile looked at the ground. There lay the chain, broken at last, separated where the demon figure had been. The amulet was gone. He picked it up, nervous about what it might do, but determined to know what remained. It dangled loosely from his hand. Its power was gone. Or was it? What would happen if he invoked it again? Stile decided that discretion was best. He coiled the chain, laid it on the ground, and rolled a rock to cover it. Let the thing stay there, pinned like a poisonous snake. Now that the threat was over, Stile unwound. His body was shivering with reaction. What exactly had happened? What was the explanation for it? He postulated and discarded a number of theories. He prided himself on his ability to analyze any situation correctly and swiftly. That was a major part of his game's success. What he concluded here as the most reasonable hypothesis fitting all his observations was quite unreasonable. A. He was in a world where magic worked. B. Someone, thing, was trying to kill him here, too. He found conclusion A virtually incredible, but he preferred it to the alternatives, that a super technological power had created all this, or that he, Stile, was going crazy. Conclusion B was upsetting. but death threats against him had become commonplace in the past few hours. So it was best to accept the evidence of his experience, that he was now in a fantasy realm and still in trouble. Stile rubbed his fingers across his neck, feeling the burn of the chain. Who was after him here? Surely not the same anonymous angry citizen who had sent the android squads. The serf who had crossed the curtain and given him the amulet had been friendly. Had he wanted to kill Stile, he could have done so by invoking the demon at the outset. It seemed more likely that the man had been genuinely trying to help, and that the amulet had acted in an unforeseen manner. Perhaps there was a number of such magic talismans. Dual purpose. Clothe the ordinary person, kill certain other persons. Other persons like Stile. That left a lot in doubt, but accounted for what had happened. Stile was a fair judge of people and motives. Nothing about the other man had signaled treachery or enmity. The amulet, as a mechanism to protect this land from certain people, seemed reasonable. Why was he, Stile, unwanted here? That he would have to find out. It was not merely because he was new. The stranger had been new, not so long ago, by his own admission. Presumably, he had been given a similar amulet, and used it, and it had performed as specified. Stile had at first suspected some kind of practical joke, but that demon had been no joke. It could not be because he was small or male. Those could hardly be crimes in a human society. There had to be something else. Some special quality about him that triggered the latent secondary function of the amulet. Unless the effect was random. One bad amulet slipped in with the good ones. A kind of Russian roulette. And he happened to be the victim. But he was disinclined to dismiss it like that. A little bit of paranoia could go far toward keeping him out of any further mischief. Best to assume someone was out to get him, and play it safe. Meanwhile, he would be well advised to get away from this region, before whoever had laid the amulet trap came to find out why it had failed. And he wanted to learn more about the status of magic here. Was it some form of illusion, or was it literal? The demon had shown him that his life could depend on the answer. Where would he go? How could he know? Anywhere he could find food and sleep safely and remain hidden from whatever enemy he must have. Not the nearest castle he had spied. He was wary of that now. Anywhere near this place was suspect. He had to go somewhere in the wilderness, alone. Alone? Stile did not like the thought. He was hardly a social lion, but he was accustomed to company. Sheen had been excellent company. For this strange land, Stile nodded to himself. Considering all things, he needed a horse. He understood horses. He trusted them. He felt secure with them. He could travel far with a good steed, and there surely were horses grazing in those fields to the north. He had not been able to make out the specific animals he had seen from the tree, but they had had a horsey aspect. There we go. That chapter was much faster. And hello, everyone out there who has stopped in to say hello. In whichever method you happen to be watching on, be it Kick or Twitch or TikTok or YouTube or wherever you happen to be. Thanks for being here, guys. I appreciate you. If you guys have questions about what it is that I'm doing or what I'm reading, please let me know. If not, let me go and take a look and see how long this next chapter is. All right, we're at 26%. Okay. We can get another chapter in. It's another 4% of the book, so clearly I do this on Kindle, and I watch it based on the percentages on the bottom because my sizing on the books does weird things to pages and stuff. So that's the way that I look through it. And EJ Toll, good evening to you. Glad that you were here and enjoying. Hopefully your writing has been going well, and you've been enjoying putting out the videos that you're putting out. For anybody who has not done so, make sure you stop out there on YouTube and check out EJ Toll's channel. Puts out vocab words for you daily. Go check it out. Subscribe. Give him some love, would you? All right, guys, let's jump in. This will be the last chapter for the evening. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. Manure. Stile walked north, keeping a wary eye out for hazards, demonic or otherwise, and for something else. The land, as the trees thinned, became pretty in a different way. There were patches of tall, lush grass and multicolored flowers, and sections of tumbled rocks. And finally, a lovely little stream, evidently issuing from the mountains to the south, bearing irregularly northwest. The water was absolutely clear. He lay on his stomach and put his lips to it, at the same time listening for any danger. Drinking could be a vulnerable moment. The water was so cold his mouth went numb and his throat balked at swallowing. He took his time, savoring it. Beverages were so varied and nutritious and available on Proton that he had seldom tasted pure water, and only now appreciated what he had missed. Then he cast about for fruit trees, but found none. He had no means to hunt and kill animals right now, though in time he was sure he could devise something. Safety was more urgent than nourishment, at the moment. His hunger would have to wait. With a horse, he could go far and fast, leaving no footprints of his own and no smell not masked by that of the animal. He would become untraceable. He followed the stream down, knowing it was a sure guide to the kind of animal life he wanted. This was ideal horse country. Had he actually seen some horses grazing there from the treetops, or only made an image of a wish? He could not be certain now, but trusted his instincts. Magic confused him, but he knew the ways of horses well. Suddenly, he spied it. The semicircular indentation of the hoof of a horse, and safely back from the water, a pile of horse manure. Confirmation. Stile examined the hoofprint. It was large, indicating an animal of perhaps 17 hands in height, solidly built. It was unshod and chipped at the fringes, but not overgrown. A fat, healthy horse who traveled enough to keep the hooves worn and was careless enough to chip them on stones. Not the ideal mount for him, but it would do. Stile felt the relief wash through his body. Now that he had the proof, he had not imagined it. He had not deluded himself. There really were horses here. His experience with the demon amulet had shaken his certainties, but this restored them. He moved over to the manure and stared down at it, and faded into a memory. 17 years ago, as a youth of 18, looking down at a similar pile of dung. His parents' tenure had ended, and they had had to vacate planet Proton. Tenure was 20 years for serfs, with no exceptions, except possibly via the game, a more or less futile lure held out to keep the peons hoping. He had been fortunate. He had been born early in their tenure, and so had 18 free years. He had fitted in a full education and mastered Proton society before he had to make the choice to stay with his folks or to stay on Proton. His parents, with 20 years cumulative pay awaiting them, would be moderately wealthy in the galaxy. They might not be able to swing passage all the way back to Earth, but there were other planets that were really quite decent. They would be able to afford many good things. On the other hand, If he remained on Proton, he would have to serve 20 years as a serf, naked, obedient to the whims of some citizen employer, knowing that when that tenure ended, he too would be exiled. But here on Proton was the game. He had been addicted to the game early. In a culture of serfs, it was an invaluable release. The game was violence, or intellect, or art, or chance, alone or with tools or machines or animals. But mainly, it was challenge. It had its own hierarchy, independent of the outside status of the players. Every age ladder had its rungs, for all to see. The game had its own magic. He was good at it from the outset. He had a natural aptitude. He was soon on his ladder, on any rung he chose. But he never chose too high a rung. Family or game? It had been no contest. He had chosen Planet Proton. He had taken tenure the day his parents boarded the spaceship, and he had waited for a citizen to employ him. To his surprise, one had picked him up the first day. He had been conducted to the citizen's plush estate. There was no unplush citizen's estate. And put in the pasture and given a wagon and a wide pitchfork. His job was to spade horse manure. He had to take his fork and wheelbarrow and collect every pile of dung the citizens' fine horses were gracious enough to deposit on the fine lawns. Homesick for his exiled family, it was not that he had loved them less, but that at his age, he had loved the game more. And, unaccustomed to the discipline of working for a living, he found this a considerable letdown. Yet it did allow him time to be alone, and this was helpful. He was not alone during off hours. He slept in a loft barracks with 9 other pasture hands, and ate in a mess hall with 30 serfs. He had no privacy and no personal possessions. Even his bedding was only on loan, a convenience to prevent his sweat from contaminating anyone else. In the rooming, the light came on and they all rose, swiftly. At night, the light went out. No one missed a bed check, ever. At home with his folks, he had had no curfew. They went off to their employers by day, and as long as he kept up with his schooling, his time was largely his own, which meant he would be playing the game and drilling himself in its various techniques. Here, it was different, and he wondered whether he had, after all, made the right choice. Of course, he had to grow up sometime. He just hadn't expected to do it overnight. The citizen employer was inordinately wealthy, as most citizens were. He had several fine pastures in scattered locations. It was necessary to travel through the city domes from one property to another, and somehow the work was always piling up ahead of him. Some of the pastures were cross-fenced, with neat white earth-grown wooden boards and genuine pre-rusted nails. These barriers were, of course, protected by invisible microwaves that delivered an uncomfortable electric shock to anyone who touched the surface. The horses were not smart, but they had good memories. They seldom brushed the fences. Stile, of course, had to learn the hard way. No one told him in advance. That was part of his initiation. He learned. He found that the cross-fencing was to keep the horses in one pasture while allowing a new strain of grass to become established in another. If the horses had at it prematurely, they would destroy it by overgrazing before it had a chance. Pastures were rotated. When animals had to be separated, they were put in different pastures. There were many good reasons for cross-fencing, and the employer, despite his wealth, heeded those reasons. Stile's problem was that he had to cross some of those fences to collect the manure from far pastures. He was small, too small simply to step over as a tall serf might. He was acrobatic, so could readily have hurdled the 1.5-meter fences, but this was not permitted, lest it gave the horses notions. The horses did not know it was possible to jump fences outside of a formal race, so had never tried it. Also, his landing might scuff the turf, and that was another offense. Only horses had the right to scuff. They were valuable creatures with consummate privileges. Thus he had to proceed laboriously around the fence, going to far-flung gates where, of course, he had to debate the right-of-way with horses who outmassed him by factors of 10 to 15. This slowed his work, and he was already behind. Fortunately, he was a good runner, and if he moved swiftly, the horses often did not bother to keep up. They could outrun him if they had a mind to, any time, but they never raced when they didn't have to. It seemed to be a matter of principle. They did not feel the same rivalry with a man that they did with members of their own species. Then he discovered the stile, a structure like a standing stepladder that enabled him to cross the fence and haul his wheelbarrow across without touching a board. The horses could not navigate such a thing, and did not try. It was, in its fashion, a bridge between worlds. With it, he could at last get around the pastures fast enough to catch up to his work. Now that he was on tenure, he was expected to take an individual name. He had gone by his father's serf name, followed by a dependence number. When the Proton Serf Registry asked him for his choice of an original and personal designation, his irrevocable and possibly only mark of distinction, he gave it: style.
Style? As in elegance?
The serf interviewer inquired, gazing down at him with amusement.
A grandiose appellation for a lad your size.
Stile's muscles tightened in abdomen, buttocks, and shoulders. This lad was 18, full grown, but to strangers he looked 12. The depilatories in proton washwater kept the hair off his face and genitals, so that his sexual maturity was not obvious. A woman his size would not have had a problem. Depilatories did not affect her most obvious sexual characteristics. He was fed up with the inevitable remarks. Normal-heighted people always thought they were being so damned clever with their slighting allusions to his stature. But already he was learning to conceal his annoyance, not even pretending to take it as humor. Stile, as in fence, Stile. I'm a pasture hand.
Oh.
He was so designated, and thereafter was invariably addressed this way. The use of the proper name was obligatory among serfs. Only citizens had the pleasure of anonymity, being addressed only as Sir. If any serf knew the name of a citizen, he kept it to himself, except on those rare occasions when he needed to identify his employer for an outsider. It turned out to be a good choice: style. It was original and distinctive, and in the context of the game, suggestive of the homonym. For in the game, he did indeed have a certain style. But best of all were the ramifications of its original meaning: a bridge between pastures. A style represented a dimensionally expanded freedom and perception, as it were a choice of worlds. He liked the concept. With experience, he became more proficient. Every clod of dung he overlooked was a mark against him, a sure route to ridicule by the other hands, all of whom were larger, if not older than he, and had more seniority. In a society of workers who had no individual rights not relating to their jobs, the nuances of private protocol and favor became potent.
Style. 2 clods in the buckwheat pasture.
The foreman would announce grimly as he made his daily review of demerits, and the group would snigger discreetly. And Stile would be low man on the farm totem for the next day. He was low man quite often in the early weeks. Other hands would accidentally shove him, and if he resisted, he received a reprimand for roughhousing that put him low for another day. For, except in egregious cases, The higher man on the totem was always right, and when it was one serf's word against another's, the low man lost. The foreman, basically a fair man, honored this convention scrupulously. He was competent, the only serf on the farm with actual power, and the only one granted the privilege of partial anonymity. His title was used instead of his name. He never overstepped his prerogatives or permitted others to. There came one day when Stile had not fouled up. A hulking youth named Shingle was low for the day, and Shingle brushed Stile roughly on the path to the service area. Stile drew on his game proficiency and ducked while his foot flung out, accidentally sending Shingle crashing into the barn wall. Furious, Shingle charged him, fists swinging, and Stile dropped to the ground, put his foot in the man's stomach, hauled on one arm, and flipped him through the air to land on the lush green turf so hard his body gouged it. Shingle's breath was knocked out, and the other hand stood amazed. The foreman arrived.
"What happened here?"
he demanded.
"An accident," the others informed him, smirking innocently. "Shingle fell over Stile."
The foreman squinted appraisingly at Stile, who stood with eyes downcast, knowing this meant trouble, expecting to receive the ridicule of the group again. Fighting was forbidden on these premises. Out came the clipboard the foreman always carried.
"Shingle, one gouge in turf,"
the foreman said, and almost smiled as the group sniggered. For Shingle had been the man low on the totem, whose business it had been to avoid trouble. He was, by definition, wrong. The foreman turned to Stile.
"Accidents will happen, but in future you will report to the recreation room for practice in your martial arts, Stile."
He departed on his rounds. Stile only gained 1 day clear of the low totem, officially. For that day he overlooked another dropping. But he had traveled considerably higher in the estimate of his peers. They had not known he was into martial art. In turn, he remembered how they had stood by him, honoring the convention, laughing this time at their other fellow. Stile had won, by the tacit rules. The others had seemed to be against him only because he had been low totem, not because he was new or small. That was a supremely warming realization. After that, Stile began to make friends. He had held himself aloof, unconsciously, assuming the others looked down on him. If they had, they certainly didn't anymore. Now when he fouled up, and they snickered, it was friendly, almost rueful. Even Shingle, nose out of joint because the episode, never made an issue of it. He too abided by the rules, and he had lost fairly. Meanwhile, Stile was becoming adept at spotting horse manure. Horses tended to deposit their solid loads in semi-private places, in contrast to their liquid ones. Liquid went anywhere at all, sometimes even on their food, but solids were always well away from eating, grazing, or resting areas. This made the piles more challenging to find. Missing piles tended to put him low on the totem. Consequently, Stile had considerable incentive to improve his performance. He developed an extremely sharp eye for horse manure. His nose was not much help, for horses had mild refuse, unlike pigs or chickens. Never unpleasant, its odor faded quickly. If left a few days, God forbid, it could even sprout grass from undigested grains, for the digestion of horses was less sophisticated than that of cows. Horses were adapted to running, and their structure and heat dissipation mechanism and digestion reflected this. So Stile's nose availed only when he was in the near vicinity of a find. Yet sight was not the whole answer either, for the piles could be concealed in copses of trees or amidst bushes. Sometimes he found chunks of it in the foliage of low-springing branches. There was also the problem of rain, artificial, of course, here in the domes, that wet down the manure and tended to flatten and blend it with its surroundings. Even when everything was ideal, manure seemed to be able to disappear when he was in the vicinity, only to reappear when the foreman checked. It was so easy to overlook a pile on the left while collecting one on the right. Stile's instincts for manure sharpened to the point of near perfection. He could spade a full pile into his barrow with one scoop and heave, not missing a chunk. He learned the favorite deposit sites of the horses and checked there first. Sometimes he even beat the artificial flies there. He could look at a section of pasture and tell by the lay of it whether a horse would want to contribute. Yet, when he had mastered his job, it grew boring. Stile was bright, very bright. People tended to assume that small stature meant small intelligence, but it was not true. The work became stultifying. Had he mastered calculus and terrestrial ecology and aspects of quantum physics merely to fling dung for 20 years? Call him the king of dung. Why had the citizens snapped him up so quickly only to throw him away on this? But citizens were all powerful on Proton. They did not answer to serfs for their actions. Stile could neither complain nor change employers. His rights in the matter extended only to accepting proffered employment or suffering premature termination of tenure. If he wanted to remain on planet Proton, he obeyed the system. He spaded dung. Often while at work, he watched the horses covertly, lest he seemed to be malingering. There was Sonny, a small, handsome paint hackney with large ears, used for training new riders, though he had no proper trot. Simcoe Cloud, an Appaloosa gelding 16 hands high, with a pretty blanket, but too large a head. Navajo, a fine quarter horse, dominant in her pasture, though she was a mare. In another pasture was Misty, a gray, plump Tennessee walker with a will of her own, and her companion Sky Blue, only 14 hands high and over 20 years old. Blue was a former harness racer, well-trained but shy despite her graying head. There was Cricket, also graying verging on white. There were, according to the dictates of horse registry, no white horses. A horse that looked white was either albino or registered gray. Thus the joke. What color was George Washington's white horse? Gray. There constituted Stile's world during much of his working time. He came to know them all, from a moderate distance, from Shetland pony to massive draft horse. He longed to associate more closely with them, to pat them, brush them, walk them, but that was the prerogative of the stable hands, fiercely guarded. Stile was only a pasture hand, never allowed to get overly familiar with the stock. On many days his closest approach to a living horse was its manure. Yet from that necessary distance, what beauty! There was a peculiar grace to a horse, any horse. The power of the muscles, the spring of the ankles, the alertness of the ears, the constant swishing of the tail. There were no natural flies here, so android flies were provided that made loud buzzing sounds and swooped around the horses, just to provide exercise for those tails. Stile loved to watch the tails, perhaps the prettiest thing about any horse except for the manes. On occasion he saw a visiting horse with a red ribbon tied in the tail, the signal of an animal that kicked. If a pasture or stable hand got kicked, he was punished, not the valuable horse. Serfs were expected to be careful, not risking the horse's precious feet by contact with the serf's drab flesh. Stile made the best of it. He was hardly conscious of this at the time, but the extreme value placed on horses here was to make a profound impression on his attitude in life. These were not the racing animals. These were the retirees, the injured, the secondary steeds. Yet they were worth more than the lives of any of the serfs. Some serfs rebelled, secretly hating the animals they tended, but Stile absorbed the propaganda completely in this respect. The horse became his ideal. The horse, though confined to its pasture, had perfect freedom, for the pasture was equine heaven. If Stile had been a horse, he would have been in heaven too. Horses became prettier than people in his eyes, And though intellectually he denied this, emotionally he accepted it. Stile was in love with horses. Thus, he became an avid student of the species. Not only did he study the nuances of mannerisms of the particular animals in his pastures, noting that each horse had a personality fully as distinct as that of any serf. During his free time, he studied texts on horse manure. He learned of the intestinal parasites that might be found in it, the worms and the maggots and the microscopic vermin. Of course, there were no such parasites here, but he pretended there might be, and looked assiduously for the signs. He learned to judge the general health of a horse by its manure, whether it was being worked hard or was idle, what its diet was and in what proportions. Some horses had hard clods, some loose. Stile could tell which horse had produced any given pile, and thus was aware of the past day's location of each horse without ever seeing the animals directly. Time passed. One day, 2 years into his tenure, Stile actually spied a worm in manure. He reported this immediately to the foreman.
"A worm in our manure?" the man demanded incredulously. "You've got delusions of grandeur."
But they tested the horse, for the foreman let nothing pass unverified. And Stile was correct. A slow-hatching variety of parasite had slipped through the quarantine and infected the animal. It was not a serious bug and would not really have hurt the horse, but it was genuine. The larvae had manifested in the manure only on the day Stile noted them. He had caught the nuisance before it could spread to other animals. The foreman took Stile to the shower, washed him personally as if he were a child, and combed his hair with an available curry comb. Stile submitted, amazed at this attention. Then the foreman brought him, shining clean, to a small door in the wall of the stable.
"Always say sir to him," the foreman said warningly. "Never turn your back until he has dismissed you."
Then he guided Stile firmly through the door. Stile found himself, for the first time, in the presence of his employer. The other side of the barn was a palatial apartment with video screens on 3 walls. On each screen was a portion of a composite picture, the surface of a mountainous land as seen from the air. The image shifted in 3-dimensional cohesion, making the illusion most effective. The floor was almost transparent quartz, surely imported from a quarry on Earth, thus more valuable weight for weight than local gold. What affluence! The citizen sat in a plush swivel chair upholstered in blue silk, on whose armrest a number of control buttons showed. He was garbed in an ornate robe that seemed to be spun from thread made of platinum, and wore fine suede slippers. He was not an old man, and not young. Rejuvenation treatments made his body handsome and his age indeterminate. Though behind that facade of health, nature surely kept accurate score. Few citizens lived much over a century, despite the best medicine could do. He possessed no overpowering atmosphere of command. Had Stile encountered him on the streets, surf naked, he would never have recognized him as a citizen. The man was completely human. It was the clothing that made the difference. But what a difference it made! The citizen was facing to the side, his eyes on a passing cloud. He seemed unaware of Stile's intrusion. The foreman jogged Stile's elbow. Stile tried several times and finally choked out his announcement of arrival. "Sir?" The citizen's eyes flicked to cover him. "You are the lad who spotted the worm." The voice was ordinary too, amazingly. "Yes, sir." "You were promoted to stable boy." And the citizen rotated in his swivel chair, turning his glossy back, dismissing Stile. Stile found himself back in the barn. He must have walked there, guided by the foreman. Now the man led him by the hand to a cabin at the edge of the pasture. 3 stable hands stood beside it, at attention.
"Stile is joining you," the foreman said. "Fetch his gear."
With alacrity, they took off. In moments, Stile's bedding, body brush, and towel were neatly set up by the fourth bunk in the cabin. The stable hands were congratulating him. He was, of course, low man of the house, the boy. But it was like a fraternity, a giant improvement from the barracks. Only 4 to share the shower, curfew an hour later, and a cabin vid screen. Stile's days of spading and hauling manure were over. A new serf took his place in the pastures. Stile was now of a higher echelon. He was working directly with the horses. Reward had been as swift and decisive as punishment for infractions. At one stroke, the citizen had made 2 years of dung worthwhile. Stile lifted his eyes from the manure of this wilderness realm. Oh, yes, he knew about manure. He had never forgotten what dung had done for him. He considered it not with distaste or horror, but almost with affection. He walked on down the river, inspecting hoofprints and manure. Some of these horses were large, some medium, some healthy, some less so. Some did have worms in their droppings, and these gave Stile a perversely good feeling. A worm had promoted him. This region, then, was not sterile. It was natural. Flies hovered about the freshest piles. Genuine flies, he was sure. Species he knew only from books and museum specimens. No one policed this region. The old piles lay undisturbed, sprouting toadstools, gradually settling, dissolving in rainfall, bright green grass growing up through them. No self-respecting horse would eat at a dung site, so such blades remained unclipped. Nature's way of preventing overgrazing, perhaps. But Stile was appalled to see such an excellent pasture in such disrepair. Did no one care about these horses? They must be wild, uncared for, which meant that he would be free to take whichever one he chose. He might have to break it for riding, but he knew how to do that. Even with his injured knees, he could ride any horse. Only specialized racing required extreme flexure of the knees. For other riding, the legs were used for balance, for purchase, and guidance of the steed. There was evidently a fair-sized herd in this region. A number of mares, governed by a single powerful stallion? No, there seemed to be several males. He could tell by the positioning of the hoofprints about the indentations of urination sites. Males watered in front of the hind hooves, females behind. But there was bound to be a dominant stallion, for that was the way of horses. Geldings or cut males were no more competitive than mares, but potent stallions demanded recognition. That dominant stallion would probably make the finest steed for Stile's purpose, but would also be too obvious. Stile needed a good, fast, but inconspicuous animal, a non-herd stallion. Probably there were no geldings here, if the animals were actually wild, or a mare. A good mare was in no way inferior. Some of the most durable runners were female. Stile had ridden a mare named Thunder once, who brooked no backtalk from any horse, regardless of size or sex, and was herself a magnificent, high-stepping, lofty-headed creature. If he could find a mare like her here. He spied the prints of a small horse, no more than 14 hands, on the verge of being a pony, but supremely healthy. Probably a mare. There was something about the delicacy with which she had placed her feet. Every hoof was sound, and the manure had no infestation. She could run, too. He traced her galloping prints in the turf, noting the spread and precision of the marks, the absence of careless scuff marks or signs of tripping. No cracks in these hooves, no sloppy configurations. A good horse, in good condition, could outrun a greyhound, maintaining a velocity of 65 kilometers per hour. This could be that kind of horse. She seemed to be a loner, apart from the herd, drinking and feeding in places separate from the others. That could mean she was more vulnerable to predators, so would have to be more alert. Tougher, swifter. But why was she alone? Horses were basically herd animals. He followed this trail by print and manure. At first, the piles were old, but as he used his skill to orient, they became fresher. It took him some hours to make real progress, for the horses had wandered far, as healthy horses did. As Stile walked, he wondered more persistently. What made this one separate from her companions? Was she, like himself, a private individual who had learned to value alone time? Or had she been excluded from the herd? What would constitute reason for such exclusion? Obviously, she may do quite well alone, but did she really like it? Stile had quite a lot of empathy for horses, and a lot for outsiders. Already he liked this little mare he had not yet seen. He did not, after all, need any giant steed to ride. His weight was slight, and he knew how to make it seem lighter. A small horse, even a pony, could easily support him. In heroic fantasy, the protagonist always bestrode a giant stallion. Stile could handle such a horse, but knew there were points to smallness too, just as there were points to small people. Here he was, abruptly at an aspect of the truth. He was very small for his kind. Therefore, he liked small things. He identified with them. He knew what it felt like to be looked down on and to be the butt of unfunny jokes.
Hey, did ya hear the one about the little moron?
Why did it always have to be a little moron? Why did the terms midget, dwarf, pygmy, and runt have pejorative connotation? What the hell was so funny about being small? Since small people were not inferior intellectually, it stood to reason that smallness was a net asset, a better value pound for pound. So why didn't he really believe it? He should not choose a horse because it was small, but because it was the best mount for his purpose. Yet, subjectively, Stile's irate chain of thought was interrupted by the sight of his objective. There she stood, as pretty a little mare as he had ever seen. Her coat was glossy black, except for white socks on her hind feet, one rising higher than the other. Her mane fell to the right side, ebony sleek, and her tail was like the tresses of a beautiful woman. Her hooves glistened like pearl, dainty and perfectly formed. She had a Roman nose, convex rather than straight or concave, but in nice proportion, and her horn was a spiraled marvel of ivory symmetry. Her what? Stile actually blinked and rubbed his eyes. He only succeeded in blurring his vision, but what he saw was no trick of the light. He had found a unicorn. There we go, guys, and that is the end of our reading for tonight. So, Joy in general, thanks for being here. I'm glad to have you here. Yeah, I did see your comment last week. I will be very honest, I had no idea that there was a show coming out for this. I love the fact that there's a show coming out for this. I'm a little confused as to what they're going to do with it, but let's hold on. Let's pull this up really quick. Yeah, I had absolutely no idea that there was one coming out. I actually generally try to stay away from things like that when I'm doing my reading, and worry that somebody's going to come in and say, "Oh, well, you can't do this. It's copywritten. Take it down." And so I would normally try to avoid it. But this has been a favorite book of mine since I was very little. Let's pull this up really quick. So Split Infinity, a television series adaptation by True View Entertainment, the development in 2025. So it does look like they are, working on making this into a television show. Again, I've read this book probably. I've read at least the first 3 books of this series probably half dozen times at least. So if you, so yeah, if, and yes, live action is something that I think it's supposed to be. So if you look, they have some concept art for it. Anybody who's read the books knows what this is, but I'm not going to spoil it because we haven't gotten there yet. And so we have some of the various people that we have in here. So like this is supposed to be a concept art of Sheen. So it gives you an idea of what Sheen may look like in this concept art. Um, some others that we have not met yet. Um, this should be our concept picture, I would assume, of Stile. So this gives you an idea. Again, you can't see his height in here. You've got a little idea of him being a jockey up here, riding on some of the horses as it goes through. These are some other characters that, once again, we have not met yet, so I'm not going to get into them in depth. But if you search out there for just Split Infinity television show, it'll take you right to this page. And so it looks really intriguing, but the part of this that I am really wondering how they're going to do is how they're going to deal with the nudity of the serfs. No, you're right. The concept art of this is really good. As we go through. So just to pull in really quick, this is, the black unicorn. But again, we'll find out more about her on the next reading. But I'm really, I think this could be just amazing. But when you think about the fact that he's surrounded by beautiful naked women all the time, how they're going to do this in a television show, unless it's on like HBO or something like that. Because let's be honest, Westworld, had a lot of nudity in it, and so could certainly be a thing on some of those specialty ones. But you're not going to see it on normal network shows. So I'm really curious as to how they're going to tackle some of that. But I'm really intrigued, and this will absolutely be a show that I will watch when it comes out. So certainly get out there. You can take a look at this. So you'll see that there are, a whole bunch of books in this series. So if they do go beyond, the first one, let's say they do a season for book one and then a season for book two, it's going to be a long time in the development probably of some of this stuff. And, as long as people are enjoying this, I will probably do at least the first 3 books of this series. As most of you guys who have been around for a little while know, I record all of the chapters as I'm doing them. They are all available for replay on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius, along with any of the books that I've done on these Tuesday story times. So I have a variety of different books that you can check out on my YouTube page. Hey, if you like listening to books, stop out there, check them out. But I'm happy to know that they're pulling this out and doing this. But yeah, when I selected this book, I had no idea that it was coming, hadn't searched for it. This is the first series of Piers Anthony that they're actually putting onto the screen. So that's really cool. But it's also why I didn't ever go and look for it. Who knew? Anyways, check it out, guys. Again, if you have not already, make sure you stop by my YouTube page. Check out some of the replays. If you've missed some of it, great way to catch back up on it. And as with any of these books that I'm doing, if you enjoy them, support the author. Go buy the book. All of these ones I've been able to get on Kindle. You may be able to get physical copies of some of this. I actually have Split Infinity and Blue Adept and Juxtaposition somewhere in my house. I couldn't tell you where they are right now, but they're somewhere in my house. But make sure that you're supporting the authors of these books. I love your support. Don't get me wrong. Your support is the reason I continue to do this. But make sure you're supporting the actual authors of the books too, if you've been enjoying some of these. But thank you guys. The greatest gift that you can give to a streamer is the gift of your time. And I appreciate that you guys have given me the gift of yours this evening. Whether it was for 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, part of a chapter, whatever it happened to be. Thanks so much for having been here with me. I greatly appreciate it. Whichever format that you're watching on, make sure that you've liked, subscribed, followed, do any of those things. The free ones I'm just perfectly fine with. Just help me to continue to grow my channels. Share it out to your friends if they might be interested in it. Again, all the replays available on my YouTube channel. youtube.com/@SirArminius. You can find me on Sir Arminius any of the various places. I will be back again tomorrow. Tomorrow is Wednesday, so we will have... I will not be back tomorrow. Scratch that. One of the players in Kingmaker, tomorrow is Pathfinder Day. One of our players in the Kingmaker campaign has asked that I not stream the games anymore. They're not comfortable with being on the stream, so I absolutely abide by that. So once a month, I take the Wednesday off, and I just don't stream tomorrow. Thursday, I will be back for Mech Warrior Online, Stompy Mech Night, and then I will probably be back on Saturday. I always take Friday off, and one day during the weekend to spend with family. Thank you all again so much. I hope you guys have yourselves a wonderful evening. Thank you again for all the support that you provide me. Joy in general, thank you so much for bringing my attention to the fact that there is a television show out there for it. Again, if you guys haven't, EJ Toll, make sure you stop out there and check him out. Great writer, and hopefully he and I will be collaborating some more in the future as we're looking to be able to each grow our own things. Have a wonderful evening, everybody, and I will see you guys all again really soon. Good night, all.